Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, frame rating HD 7990 versus GTX 690 versus GTX Titan, and a couple of affordable cards too. Ivy Ridge eProcessor leak, UASP speeds up USB and eSATA in a major way, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 212, recorded April 4th, 2013. That's what Dremel tools are for. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the best and most useful news and answers on how to make your equipment operate faster and better and more, which is kind of a weird way of saying we talk about the new hardware, we tell you what you should buy, and we tell you how to get your stuff to run properly. And when I say stuff, it's not just desktop computers and notebooks. We love the tablets too, because I'm told the tablets are taking over. Mr. Ryan Shrout, PCPer.com, do you believe the tablets are taking over?
I mean, sure. They're going to outsell PCs. That's pretty much, that's just going to happen. But they're not going to get rid of PCs. So I'm not worried. I'm not worried.
I think you're worried.
I'm not worried.
You sound worried.
I look a little sunburnt in this video coming back to me, but hopefully that's just, maybe that's good news. It's good news.
It's just, you being sunburned or Skype? Skype,
well,
coloring everything lightly pink.
Yeah.
Frame rating, HD 7990 versus GTX 690 versus GTX Titan, and the HD 7950 versus the GTX 660 Ti. The issue so far has been that the AMD cards have not fared as well under frame rate testing as the NVIDIA cards. What is the latest word, Mr. Shrout?
So for anybody who maybe didn't pay attention last week or just kind of glossed over it, I want to reiterate that this is not just kind of a rehash of benchmarks and results that we have seen earlier in the year. The frame rating process that PCPer is using for graphics testing is now completely new and completely changed. It uses hardware capture, and it's telling very different stories about certain graphics card configurations than what we saw before using FRAPs or integrated benchmarks or anything like that. So when we talk about this stuff, if you haven't read about what this process is, I highly encourage everybody to go to PCPer.com, look for one of the stories on frame rating, and at the front of that story, you'll see an outline that kind of shows the release schedule of these articles. And in that, you'll see the very first one that is called Frame Rating Dissected, and it kind of goes through the entire process. And I think that's very important to have background on when looking at these results in the future articles. Now, we talked about that last week, but what we have been doing in successive days is releasing different sets of data. The first one that you mentioned is interesting because it's probably the most interesting since the initial reveal, because it looks at the GTX 690, GTX Titan, and the Radeon HD 7990, aka HD 7970s in Crossfire. And what's cool about this is these are the $1,000 plus graphics cards. So definitely the super high-end consumers need only apply to really purchasing these types of products. But it's very interesting to see the results from this type of data because, you know, when the Titan came out, Patrick, one of the debates that we had was, okay, NVIDIA now has two cards that sell for $999.
Right.
Why?
But one's quieter. And one has more, basically, like the Titan has all the quiet and all of the, it's like, what, 6 gigabytes of frame buffer packed inside of that puppy. So in theory, it should perform better with multiple monitors than the 6990.
Right, and that's actually what it comes down to. So the complaint we got when the Titan launched was, well, why would I buy a card that performs 20% slower GTX 690 for the same amount of money? Right. And in many cases, the 690 does in fact run faster than the Titan. But as we have come to start to reevaluate things with the frame rating capture method of graphics performance, we're now looking at more than just frame rates. We're now looking at frame time consistency. And what we'll find is, I'm going to look through here for a particular result. I think Burke was on the Battlefield 3 page. And if you look at, you know, the single resolution results Actually, even if you look at the Battlefield 3 1920 by 1080, if we scroll down just a little bit more there to the wash of color, one more image down. Yeah, so we see this is the frame time histogram essentially, and the orange represents the AMD solution, the 7970 Crossfire. The blue represents the 690, and the green represents the Titan. The orange stands out the most because it is oscillating back and forth between high frame times and low frame times, and it presents a lot of runt frames and a lot of issues. But if we just focus on the NVIDIA stuff, if you look at the thickness of the band of color on the 690, you notice that it is wider than the color you see on the Titan. And even though the average, like the average frame time is lower on the 690,
right?
GTX Titan is thinner and tighter, which means it has more consistent frame times, which means there is less potential for stutter, less potential for animation hitches, less potential for those types of things. And that's pretty much the story throughout the results. You know, and you mentioned it just a second ago, like what really starts to happen is if on that same page, if you go down and look at the 5760 by 1080 graph, that same graph, but for the triple monitor resolution, where we compare GTX 690 and GTX Titan again, you'll see that the combination of multiple GPUs and essentially a third of the frame buffer per GPU results in a much less smooth gameplay experience on the 690 than you get on the Titan. So yes, if you just look at the average frame rate, you're going to have a better result on the 690. But if you look at the smoothness of the experience, the smoothness of the presentation of frames, you're going to find that the Titan, in general, is going to be better, definitely at multi-monitor resolutions, and in some cases, in many cases, single-monitor resolution. So it definitely paints those $2,000 card options from NVIDIA in a unique, or I'd say, you know, it explains why they made both products.
Those two $1,000 cards, because it's not $2,000 card options. Before we get a flood of email, so when we look at that though, traditionally, if I'm a gamer, especially first-person shooter, I am obsessed with the highest frame rate. Are people still going to want the 6990 with the higher frame rate, even though it doesn't feel or look as good when you actually have it on multiple screens? You know,
so I think what maybe people will want. So if you're going to game on a single monitor, even if it's 2560 by 1600 or 2560 by 1440, the GTX 690 has consistent enough frame rates that it's not an issue. But it also has faster frame rates. So I think you know, my kind of summation from comparing just these two NVIDIA options would be if you know you're only going to game on one monitor, regardless of the resolution. You know, maybe once we get into 4K, that's a different story, but we're a ways away from that. The GTX 690 is probably the better card from a performance standpoint. It's not nearly as quiet. It's not nearly as efficient. There's some other things about it that, you know, that it falls behind the Titan on. But if you look at just performance-wise, I'm comfortable recommending the 690 to gamers on a single monitor. If you have 3 monitors now, or you have 3 monitors on your wish list, and if you're buying a $1,000 video card, chances are you often get what you want. You know, the Titan is going to be slower a little bit, but I feel like that the 6 gig frame buffer really makes a difference on those ultra high resolutions. And it creates, what's interesting about that is we haven't really talked about the AMD result because it doesn't look very good. Again, like if you look at Battlefield, you look at Crysis, you look at Sleeping Dogs, those 3 games out of our 6 show really poor results for Crossfire. And you know, they're going to release an HD 7990 very soon, like a reference HD 7990. There's already the ASUS Aries 2 out for sale. There's already the Power Color Devil 13 7990 out for sale. These cards already exist. And because of the issues that AMD has with their Crossfire platform, their solution, their multi-GPU solution, doesn't look nearly as good as what NVIDIA's multi-GPU solution does, right? So if the 690 had the same problems as the HD 7990 will have, I wouldn't recommend it at all either. But because NVIDIA has improved SLI and frame metering and even frame distribution, it's a much better multi-GPU option than what AMD has.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so, then the second part of it, the second story, this GTX 660 Ti versus 7950 is a very similar discussion, right? It's
at $300, multiple monitors. You're definitely going to want to go GeForce GTX 660 at this point in time.
What's interesting, again, a lot of people have been responding to this article in a negative light. You know, a lot of AMD fans, people that have AMD products, you know, really kind of not, you know, to put it bluntly, crapping on our story and our ideas here, and they think we're biased towards AMD in some way. If you're going to go single card, the 7950 is better than the 660 Ti, and our new testing method actually verifies that. If you're going to go dual card, I would not recommend going with AMD. It's kind of like the same discussion we had with the 690 versus the Titan. If you know you're only going to use one monitor, go for the 690. I think it's going to be better for you. If you know you're only going to use one GPU, go for the Radeon 7000 series. I think it's going to be the better option for the dollar. But if you think you might want to go multi-GPU, or you know you want to go multi-GPU very soon, then I think it's a bad decision to make to go down with the Radeon 7900 cards at this point.
I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it is. And it's just the problem is it's a completely new testing process, and we're like the first people to really have a massive amount of data using this type of process. And so people question it all the time. And this was fully expected. I totally knew that, you know, we knew this was going to happen. We knew that people were gonna throw a fit because they didn't believe what we were seeing and what we were reporting, that they were going to throw a fit because NVIDIA developed the overlay that kind of matches the colors on that kind of stuff. But we've had it vetted. We actually have third-party version of the overlay in here running from the Riva Tuner, which is one of the overclocking software tools that EVGA uses and MSI use in their applications. And we've been able to verify our results using that third-party tool as well. And that's part of the thing we're going to do hopefully the next week or so. The problem is we've been I've been onslaughted with so many ideas and suggestions. Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried this new piece of software? Have you tried, you know, changing these settings? And I had so much data from our initial test run that as of today, I still haven't presented all of the data that we've already gathered. So I'm trying to finish up an article tomorrow that will round out the rest of the lineup of GTX 600 and AMD 7000 series cards, and then start to finally go back, use different pieces of software, use different configuration options. You know, we've had suggestions like, have you turned off hyper-threading on your platform? Does that maybe change things? Have you tried, there's an application called Radeon Pro. It's a third-party tool that will let you enable frame rate limiting on Crossfire configurations. What does that change? And then we have to get into all kinds of new questions, like how does it adjust, or how does it modify your input latency, which is the other big question. It's also like the other impossible thing to measure that we're trying to figure out a way to measure. And hopefully it won't take as long as it took us to get frame rating out the door.
We wait with bated breath, sir, in a completely different direction. The OYN Digital Mini Pro eSATA USB 3.0 portable hard drive enclosure review by Maury Titleman up at PCPer.com. So it's kind of funny. USB 3.0 used to be expensive, then it got a lot less expensive, and now basically it's dirt cheap. And I got to say, it's nice to see an enclosure with both USB 3.0 and eSATA for $40. And maybe it's just my local computer shop, but there were a lot of USB 3.0 enclosures. But as much as I despise eSATA as a connection, a physical connection, because it's so easy to break, it's really nice to actually see one on a portable drive, because you can basically use it to move data really, really fast off of machines that don't have USB 3.0. Sounds nitpicky, but it's good for me. The general conclusion is, where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Editor's choice from PC Per. Quote, before continuing with our final thoughts on this device, we'd like to take this opportunity to give our friends at OYN Digital and ASUS a hearty thank you for giving us the opportunity to review the Mini Pro eSATA USB 3.0 portable hard drive enclosure. Simple to set up and operate with unbelievable performance, no matter what type connection you use to connect the device to a host system. Basically, it is fast. To keep it to a simple note, and it's cheap. $40 is really, really affordable.
The uniqueness of this dock is it enables UASP support, which is a method of bulk transfer for USB 3 that increases transfer speeds actually pretty dramatically. If you actually go look at the benchmark pages, it's substantially different. And UASP is kind of the next, like what people should be expecting from these next generation connection types like Thunderbolt and that kind of stuff. The problem is bot mode, bulk only transfer protocol is old, and that's what the original USB used and what USB 2.0 used and USB 3.0 uses, and it's the one that enables backwards compatibility, and it has all these other traits that you need and want, but it's starting to slow things down. Yeah, see, that graph kind of shows you if you enable UASP on the Intel controller, you're jumping basically from read speeds of under 300 to 420 megs a second. And on the ASMedia controller, you're going from 247 to 369. So those are big jumps, right? And if for bulk file transfers, you're backing up your Steam library or you're doing something like that, it can make noticeable difference. And that when ASUS first showed us this stuff last year, the Z77 release, there were no docks available retail that actually supported it. And now that there are, and as you mentioned, they're cheap, I think that just makes sense going forward. Buy that SSD or that 2.5-inch drive, that you need and put it in something like this that's going to maintain that performance level.
Is ASUS currently the only motherboard manufacturer that has UASP enabled on their systems?
Yes. Okay. I think it is. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't want to say. I think yes though. They're the only ones that have it, and you download a piece of software called USB 3.0 Boost, and it's basically you enable it, and it changes some registry settings in Windows and that kind of stuff to actually enable that technology. So others might. If you guys know of other motherboards from MSI or Gigabyte or whatever that have that support, let me know. Send us an email because I would like to know that. I don't know the answer.
It would be nice. Oculus Rift, one of the things people were shouting from the rooftops about at the Game Developer Conference last week. Update yesterday, an Oculus representative reached out to PCPer in order to clarify that the information presented was forward-looking and subject to change. Naturally, later in the day, the company also posted to its forum the following statement. The information from that presentation, dates, concepts, projections, represent our vision, ideas, and ongoing research and exploration. None of it should be considered fact, though we'd love to have that projected revenue. What are we talking about here?
Have you ever tried the Oculus? Did you try the Rift at CES or anything?
No, the line was too long at CES, and I didn't really get to go to Game Developers Conference. I'm kind of waiting for the final version, especially after watching the reaction to the initial Ouya reviews.
Right. So my dev kit will be here hopefully next week, and we're going to do like a video kind of demonstration. I have no idea how I'm going to do this in any kind of meaningful way on a live stream to demo what only one person can see at a time. But if you look at that, actually, Burke, if you go up to that slide that shows the consumer V1 concept, the next slide above that one, where it shows the mass market appeal version of this could be a 1080p HD 3D screen with stereo cameras. And if you look at the output of it, looks like there's also cameras pointing out of the Oculus, which would then allow you to have, what do they call it? Augmented reality stuff, right? So, or maybe you just have your screen, the game that you're playing or whatever is semi-opaque, right? And so you can see the real world in front of you, if you're talking with other people, and then you kind of have your computing environment on in front of you as well. I think that's actually really, really cool to see. I know the higher resolution screens on each eye would be a big improvement over the dev kits that are shipping out right now. And then they talked about support for games like Hawken and Crysis in Minecraft, which sounds pretty awesome. Saw Skyrim on the list, which sounds really awesome. And I'm really looking forward to trying this out and hoping I don't get seasick immediately.
It's been interesting hearing, as several people I work with over at Rev3 Games spent a bunch of quality time with it, and it's been interesting to watch people's reaction to it. And it's kind of got a lot. It seems to have a lot of the classic VR system kind of issues. Some people react to it poorly. Some people react to it fine. Some people have some issues after extended use. I thought it was interesting looking at the article talking about the ongoing theme at Oculus VR was that if it's not in a cell phone, it's not in Oculus. But the idea that full motion VR might be coming in the none too distant future was the quote that Tim Very pulled out in the article. You know, the idea that would eliminate VR sickness, and it would, you know, basically, like, you know, there can be a disconnection between what your eyeballs are seeing and what your body is feeling.
Right.
Some people react poorly to that over time.
Input latency is the big problem. When you don't have any other points of reference, like when you're watching a screen, you're watching your monitor, you know, your mind sees everything else being very stable, and so most people don't get sick from playing video games. There are some people that still do. But when your entire vision area is covered by this device, if there is a delay from when you turn your head to when the picture moves, your mind can get really messed up, right? It goes, something's not right here. This is not how the world has acted for the last 20 years. So now I'm really confused, and it can cause sickness and dizziness and headaches and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that they're really focused on is making sure that latency is as low as possible. That's why they're, you know, I think the resolution in each screen for one screen for each eye is like 640, 480 or something like that. It's an odd resolution. It's not that specifically, but it's low, and that was to keep the latency as low as possible for the first you know, the first release and the first developer push with it. So I'm excited about it. I know a lot of people are excited about it. I mean, they got what, $2.5 million on their Kickstarter, and they've been like the darling release at CES and GDC and at PAX and all that kind of stuff. So they're definitely getting the attention.
Ivy Bridge e-processor. What's the story on the 3 Ivy Bridge e-processors that are apparently coming later this year?
The leak is that they're not much better than the Sandy Bridge e-parts, which is kind of a disappointment if it turns out to be true. The leak is the 4960X instead of 3960X, and it's labeled as still being a 6-core processor with the same 15 megs of L3 cache, same 130 watt TDP. The difference is the clock speeds go from 3.3 to 3.6, but the turbo clocks only go from 3.9 to 4 gigahertz. So you're only getting a modest frequency increase, and that's the processing tech shifts from 32 nanometer to 22 nanometer, but at the end of the day, most people don't care about that. They care about what does that shift in process tech get me from a performance or power standpoint. It doesn't look like much. I'm still holding out hope that they're going to release an 8-core version, though.
Right.
If they do that,
would be nice.
I'll be happy, and we can replace our workstation streaming machine that's running on Ivy Bridge right now with Ivy Bridge E, you know, more than double the performance, and that would be great news for me.
That would make you so happy, and the renders would be so fast. So we usually talk about, we are obsessed with solid state drives on Twitch because they make your system stupid fast. You also end up spending either A, a lot more money for the same capacity, or B, settling for a much smaller amount of capacity for a given amount of cache. More performance, less capacity. That's the SSD story. Seagate, however, remember Seagate? Seagate, Western Digital, rotating media, good stuff. Seagate's launched their 4 terabyte, 4-platter hard drive, $190 on Amazon.com. Which means 3 terabyte drives are considerably cheaper if you're looking to populate your FreeNAS box or a RAID, or just have some offline storage in a big way. It was funny, not the first 4 terabyte drives we've seen for sale. That actually started with some external enclosures. I want to say Western Digital's had a 4 terabyte internal drive, a Western Digital Black, out since around December, January. But I'm not seeing that up for sale. Oh, there it is. Yeah, the Western Digital Black 4 terabyte desktop hard drive is a 7,200 RPM, 3.5-inch drive with 64 megabytes of cache and a 5-year warranty. That's selling for $302 right now. There's the HGST Death Star, which is like a Hitachi from Western Digital. If I have that correct, I apologize if I don't. Alan will probably email me and correct me because he knows all and hears all in storage. But that's selling for like $260. And then the Seagate is selling for $190, which is pretty good. The thing I thought was really interesting is I can't seem to find, and perhaps I'm simply not digging far enough into the reviews, but I haven't been able to find the actual speed of the 4 terabyte drive?
Well, they talk about performance in terms of average read-write data rates of 146 megs per second.
Right.
And max sustained transfer speeds of 180 megs per second. And what's interesting is those are actually enabled not by faster spinning media, but now that this is the first 4 terabyte drive that has 4 platters instead of 5. So it's 1 terabyte per platter as opposed to what, 750 gigs per platter. So you actually get performance increases because of the higher density on that platter, which is nice.
But I thought it was interesting, and we've been here before where the aerial density is so high, a 5,400 RPM hard drive can outperform a 7,200 RPM hard drive, you know, which is always kind of awesome. The idea that the density is so high, it overcomes the difference in spindle speed. But I thought it was really interesting because this is the first time I've ever not been able to find the spindle speed on a drive, no matter where I looked. Like they're obviously very like, we have fast throughput.
This is 72 speed. Though. This if it doesn't say it on there, it is a 7,200 RPM drop. And when we talked about that last night on our podcast, Alan was very surprised that they were able to maintain that spindle speed but not run into any potential heat issues as well, which is good. So, and that's what you are seeing with a lot of the 4 terabyte drives, especially the more modestly priced ones, is they are running at slower spindle speeds, just to make sure that they don't run into any heat issues. And I did ask Al last night if, now that we've had 5 platters and drives before, and now we have 1 terabyte platters, are we going to get 5 terabyte hard drives? And apparently there's no reason why we couldn't. They may be 5,400 RPM or around that drives instead, but we could get 5 terabyte hard drives out of this improvement as well.
Could Lenovo make its own chips? Why would Lenovo make its own chips? What's going on with that? Tim Berry's got the write-up at PCPro.com. I just thought that was like EE Times was the original article, but why would Lenovo, of all people, suddenly decide to start making chips?
It's a popular thing to do. I mean, if you look at it, you've got Apple, Intel, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Samsung, and others that are making their own chips, making their own processors, their own SoCs. Lenovo wants to become a big player in the cell phone market. They haven't really done anything over here, but in Asia and Europe, they've had some more success. They're apparently planning on expanding its integrated circuits design team to 100 engineers in the second half of 2013. And what's left to find out is whether or not they're just going to license existing ARM architecture and kind of paste their name on it and hopefully save money that way, instead, so they don't have to buy them from a third party, or if they're going to take a more Apple-like approach and try to customize the chip in a way that makes it very specific for whatever platforms they're designing for it. I don't really know. I don't have any guesses as to why, what particular platform they would have, right? So, I mean, Lenovo has been the launch phone for like several Intel releases. I think the orange phone that they sold over there in Britain, in Europe at least, had an Intel processor in it. And it's kind of interesting to think about, would Lenovo go down the route of creating their own ARM processors when they have a very good relationship with Intel in terms of getting these ultra low power x86 processors in there. Maybe they're tired of people complaining about these x86 processors in their phones, and so they said, okay, we need to go our own route. But they decided they didn't want to buy a Samsung chip or a NVIDIA chip or a Qualcomm chip or something like that.
It's always interesting, because it's and I'm going to laugh when I say this, but it's like, Apple wanting to make its own processors as part of its larger fight with the entire cell phone manufacturing community, and Google kind of almost seems natural in hindsight. But thinking of Lenovo as a cell phone manufacturer, despite the fact that they do everything else on the planet involving computers, was a bit of a stretch, at least for me. And,
it does say the EE Times article mentions that Lenovo was turned away by Samsung when it attempted to use the company's latest Exynos Octa processor. And
really?
Thinks that might contribute to the desire to have its own chip design team.
That actually would bring it into clear focus. Also into clear focus, a bag of awesome. If you've ever thought to yourself, the Mini ITX platform, it's so tiny, it's so cool, I can fit it inside of a shoebox. The only problem, of course, is that all too often you can't get decent GPU performance if you don't consider the native performance of the CPU's graphics capability to be acceptable. ASUS has finalized the design for its Kepler-based DirectCU mini graphics card, writes Tim Very at PCPro.com. The new card combines NVIDIA's GTX 670 GPU and a reference PCB with ASUS's own power management tech and a new, much smaller air cooler. The new ASUS cooler has allowed the company to offer a card that's a mere 17 centimeters long. That is tiny for a 670. Tiny, 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 like 8 centimeters shorter. No, 24 minus 17 equals 7 centimeters shorter. Math is hard, man. That's why I majored in lit. Basically, 928 base, 1006 megahertz in boost mode, 2 gigs of GDDR5 memory. I'm excited. This is really cool. Ship date is missing in action. Price is missing in action. But I like the idea of a small form factor GPU. Is it just me?
No, I think it's really cool. It's in a spot where we are in the graphics market where it's kind of stagnant right now in terms of no new releases or no recent releases, especially on the high end. You're getting the performance of a 670, which is really high. It's actually slightly overclocked over the reference design still, and you're getting in a smaller package. It only has a single 8-pin power connector, which is kind of interesting. My only question will be, how many cases are there? Now, let me rephrase that. How many chassis are there out there where, you can fit a 2-slot cooler graphics card, but it doesn't necessarily have the room on the end for it, like where you wouldn't be able to fit a normal reference design.
That's what Dremel tools are for.
But apparently
be more of those cases now. Oops, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, apparently ASUS has done some work. They've made sure that this is quiet. They've made sure that it runs really cool, so that it kind of, the idea of a home theater PC in a small form factor is you don't want it to be loud and whiny at the same time. So they've done some work in that regard as well. We should be getting one of these in later in the month to be able to test and play around with. So it will be interesting. I don't think it will be a surprise in any way from a performance standpoint. But if we create a new, let's say, frame rate per inch of PCB length, this would probably be the winning card in that regard.
I don't want to hear the PR flack you're going to get for that one. We love your questions, people. Email us. If you don't know how to email us, you should. Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email account. We check for questions. And, of course, you can hang out with us when we're recording live on Thursday nights in the chat, the Twit Web IRC, the pound Twit Live chat. I'm going to start, talking about, 80s internet technology in a moment, so I'm going to stop myself.
So I do that.
Chat. We got an email from David, who's looking to build a new workstation. He says, love the show. Keep up the good work. Thank you, David. I'm trying to figure out what would be the best hardware setup for the type of work that I do. I work with Autodesk Maya. It's a 3D entertainment suite and video editing software, primarily Adobe products. I would like to get a box that is under $2,000, but have the power I need for the next couple of years. I usually purchase pre-built systems such as Dell, but I think I could probably get a better Windows machine for a cheaper price if I was to build it myself. Any help would be great. Thanks for the help. So I like the focus on the highlight that Bert put on the help.
He's good at that. Text advantages. It also gives you a little preview of what the next question will be, too.
Well, one, you want all of the memory. You basically want to max out your memory. This is one of the rare situations to be like, 32 gigabytes. Start with 32 gigs. 16 might be reasonable, but start with 32. Get all of the cores you can get, because Maya will take every core you can throw at it, last I checked. An SSD, you want your operating system and your your operating system on an SSD. I would maybe buy a second SSD as a scratch drive. Which may be crazy talk, but what do you think?
I would, not to self-promote again, but if you go to pcper.com/leaderboard, we have some suggested system builds. There's nothing right at the $2,000 mark. We have a $3,000, and then we have a $1,500. What I would recommend for his use case is you start with that Dream system, the $3,100 system. It's going to give you the Core i7-3960X, which is basically the top end Sandy Bridge E processor. Maybe you step that back to the 39, is it the 3930K? It's just a couple of 100 megahertz slower, but it'll save you $500. And then, the graphics card that you're looking at there, we have a GTX 690 as our purchase. And you could probably drop that down to like a GTX 680. I would recommend right now still using an NVIDIA GeForce card, especially with CUDA support for Adobe Premiere and that kind of stuff that still only uses the Mercury engine at this point. And then let's see what else we have in there. You've got the OCZ Vector SSD. You can find slightly lower cost versions of that. And then the Corsair 1200 watt power supply, which is $300. You can go down, to not the AX 1200i, maybe the 1000 watt version and save another $60 or $70. But I think if you take the processor down one step and you take the graphics card down one step, you save about $1,000. It takes this whole kind of combination down to the $2,100 range, which is kind of more in his level. And then, you can look at other places, downgrade your motherboard a little bit. We've picked the high end, one of the top end X79 motherboards, the Gigabyte X79 UD5. But it's got stuff like FireWire on it, which actually might be important for maybe some unique applications that video editors and designers and that kind of stuff actually do. And then 16 or 32 gigs of memory, like Patrick said, makes a lot of sense for that. I mean, you'd be surprised when we were doing video editing here, and then you can also open up Photoshop and drag in 40 pictures that you just took on your Canon 70, and everything just still sits in memory, and you don't have to worry about performance issues. It's a weight off of your shoulders.
And you will want to take all of the weight off of your shoulders if you're running those applications, especially if you want to try to do two things simultaneously. Windows 8 or Windows 7?
I see no reason not to go Windows 8. I really don't. I know people don't like the start menu. They don't like the Metro interface. I have Windows 8 on all. Storage spaces
is nice.
Storage spaces is nice. You get way faster boot times with Windows 8. Intel has told me on several occasions that the hyper-threading capability in Windows 8 is actually pretty much is fairly a dramatic amount improved over Windows 7. There were cases in Windows 7 where applications could sometimes accidentally be locked into the second thread instead of the first thread when it wasn't necessary, and it would kind of be stuck running a little bit slower for short periods of time. And that's all kind of been fixed in the new Windows 8 kernels and that kind of stuff. There's no reason not to go Windows 8. Every time I boot my system, I get that start menu, I hit Windows D, and I'm at a desktop, and I go about my business as if that menu did not exist. So I think the advantages you get with Windows 8 are well worth it at this point.
You just need to run Classic Shell, dude.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know why I haven't installed that on my laptop or on my desktop or anything like that. I don't know. It bothers me so little. It doesn't cross my mind. If you spend no time in Metro, just
Classic Shell, baby. Email from Serge about a GPU upgrade. He says, I'm currently running an MSI Hawk GTX 560 Ti with one monitor, 2560 by 1440, a Cat Leap, go Cat Leap, and one at 1680 by 1050. As you can expect, my 560 Ti is starting to struggle with some of the newer titles. Up until this point, I've been waiting for the new 700 series to come out, but the release date seems to keep receding. Would you recommend I upgrade or wait? If I did upgrade, would the 670 be my best bet? I personally prefer NVIDIA, but not viciously so. Not viciously so. I like that.
Yeah. It says a lot about the graphics industry.
Or at least the graphics industry consumers.
Yeah, the 560 Ti is actually a pretty good card. I would say if he upgrades, the 670 is the minimum point where he should start, because the 560 Ti shares a lot of performance with like the 660, and then the 660 Ti is a little bit faster than that. But then the 670 is a jump ahead of that, and it's not significantly more expensive. I think the 670 is like $359, and then you have to go up basically $100 to get to the 680. So I think the 670 is a good starting point. I don't have any inside knowledge about the 700 series, though. I really don't.
Is there any reason whatsoever to consider adding a second GTX 560 Ti?
Yeah, actually, yeah, there is. I mean, as long as he has a SLI multi-GPU ready motherboard. If I look real quick at Newegg here, just to you know what the problem is I don't know, the GTX 560 Ti may be really, really hard to find. No, here's some. So it looks like you can get some 560 Ti's for $179, $189. I see 3 of them left in stock at Newegg. There is a ASUS for $179, open box, a Gigabyte for $189 new, and a Galaxy for $199 new. So yeah, I would say the only maybe kind of drawback to going SLI is that these GPUs only have 1 gig of memory. So at 2560 by 1440 on that Cat Leap display, you may benefit some from going to that 2 gig frame buffer on the 670.
Got it.
I don't think the 700 series is right around the corner or anything. And if, to be honest with you, I don't know how much better the next generation of GPUs from either AMD or NVIDIA is going to actually be. So,
that
as
sounds
is
kind of
normally
ominous.
the case with me, well, yeah, I haven't heard enough excitement coming out of either camp one way or the other. And, you know, as we talk about on the show a lot, my kind of tendency is, if it's not going to be eating mac and cheese for the next 3 weeks after making the purchase because you couldn't afford it.
Right.
If you play games, get the hardware that's going to make them better and enjoy what you do, right? It's a hobby. It's all fun. So spend the money. It's not mine.
Well, with that, one last one before we go. Hey, Ryan and Patrick says, Mike, I am a huge fan of the show. Thank you, Mike. I wanted to ask both of you guys what you PC game on at home. In other words, what are your PC specs, and do you both overclock your systems? Also, what games are you playing at the moment? Ryan, did you put this in here just to shame us?
I did actually, for both of us. I wanted you to know that this was not me picking on you, that this goes both directions. But I'm going to make you go first. So he wanted to know what we gamed on at home and what games we may or may not be playing today.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'll be perfectly honest. The number 1 and number 2 games in my life right now are Bejeweled and Super Stickman Golf 2, because it's really easy to play either one of those games at 1:30 in the morning when there's a semi-conscious baby passed out on you.
Yes.
My big cool home system is a Core i7-920 with 12 gigabytes of RAM, a 256 gigabyte SSD, and an incredibly aged GPU, the name of which I will not mention for fear of being mocked publicly. I keep coming close to pulling the trigger on a new $300 GPU, and every time I go to buy that GPU, you know, I hear about another one coming out in just a couple more months, and yeah.
You know, you have a friend, a coworker, a co-host, you might even say, who has access to a lot of graphics cards. And if you ever need something, you should contact that person. I don't know who he is.
I would normally never take advantage of that kind of relationship, but given that I'm about to drop $1,000 on the broken transfer case in my truck, I may take you up on that.
Absolutely. So here's my deal. I have separated my office from my house very deliberately now, and my office has tens of thousands, if not $100,000 worth of graphics cards sitting around all the time, and we have lots of systems, all with the highest end stuff. If I want to run 3 Titans and SLI, I can do that. When I go home, I don't want to sit up in my office in front of a computer, because I sit in front of a computer all day at work, sometimes way too many hours. So what I do is I want to play games on the PC, or I'm sorry, on the TV. And I don't have a home theater PC, so what I have is I have an Alienware M17X that has a Radeon Mobility 7970M in it. And I'll bring that home and plug in the HDMI cable, and I'll play on that, and then I'll use a wireless keyboard and mouse on the couch. So that's probably where I do my most, where if I'm actually gaming for fun as opposed to gaming for work purposes, testing games and evaluating different titles and graphics cards, that's what I do. If I had to pick a game now, on Tuesday, we did a game stream for BioShock Infinite, sponsored by AMD, and they gave away some hardware and some game keys and that kind of stuff. And I got to play about 2 to 2.5 hours of BioShock Infinite. And I really, 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 really want to continue to play it. And I would, it's been probably the most well-received game released by, you know, game reviewers and that kind of stuff in a long time. And if you had any experience playing the first BioShock, which I did, I will probably tell you that the first BioShock is the last game that I played like to completion, you know, in the span of a couple of weeks, where where I couldn't make myself stop playing it. It was that good, and the story was really good. And this is very much in the same vein. So, BioShock Infinite would be the game. Right. Battlefield 3 is still popular around here. PlanetSide 2, I played that every once in a while, and it's a free to play, so there's like a little bit of a stigma you have to get past. And there's a little bit of a higher learning curve, as with most kind of massive multiplayer online games, where you initially jump in and you have no idea what the hell's going on, and everybody's way better than you. But it's a lot of fun as well. So that's what I game on at home. But then in here, when we game, I just pick a video card and install it, right? So whoever, when we're doing a game stream sponsored by AMD, I'll throw in a 7970. When we're just playing, it's just whatever happens to be installed in the graphics test bed that day. So
I have this vision of you having a GPU sommelier in the office. We have a felicitous Titan available in the Core i7, yada, yada, yada. Or would you prefer something more restrained?
That would be good. That could be a skit we could make out of that. Yeah, if I was creative in any way, that would happen now. But so.
With a big board covered with velvet, or like a cheese truck, only they pull the thing up above it. And like I've been in 2 restaurants in my life that had a cheese cart, but I have this vision of the cart and the tuxedo and the sommelier, the thing they wear with all the little devices hanging off of it. For me, I haven't had a chance to play BioShock yet. Borderlands 2 is really fascinating to me. Farming Simulator 2013, I think I'm actually going to buy because it sounds just unhinged enough for me to be really happy with it. Faster Than Light, actually, I started putzing around with looking at Steam for Linux. So I think that's probably my new sort of part-time obsession. I have to be really careful because if I get really obsessed with a game, I will do nothing but play that game. Which will end up with me being divorced and living in the backyard in the tent. So I have to treat my gaming addictions very, 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 very carefully. Because if I'm doing something where there's like 32 ways to solve something, I'll either want to figure out all 32 ways, or if I can't figure out any of the 32 ways, I will just pound myself against that problem until I find an answer. And it really ticks off my wife. And the whole forgetting to eat thing is problematic too. Man, Ryan's like, you're making me uncomfortable, dude. I don't have gaming problems like you do. It's exciting though. You actually have another appearance coming up on the Twit Network, don't you?
Not on the Twit Network. Tomorrow night in our kind of continuing explanation to people. I'm trying to make the frame rating story comprehensible to as many people as possible. Right. Linus Sebastian is actually his last name. He does Linus Tech Tips. He's one of the more popular kind of tech enthusiasts YouTube channels and that kind of stuff. And he does a show on Friday nights. Unfortunately, it's at midnight Eastern time. 9 Pacific on a Friday night. So as you might imagine, my wife is excited about that particular time slot. But I'm going to come on and do that show and answer some questions about the frame rating, the frame capture systems, and kind of explain it again and go over some results and kind of help people understand it that way. And then hopefully tomorrow we'll also have up the final initial installment of our frame rating sequence that gives results for the 7850, the 7790, the GTX 660, and the 650 Ti boost and that kind of stuff. So hopefully I'll have that finished and written and ready for consumption. So if you're curious how your cards stack up, that's the whole idea, is everybody gets to see how their card that they already own stacks up before we dive into all the new stuff.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Anything else coming up on PC Per this week?
Not from me. That's all I can handle. Like, I mean, we've got
frame rating all the time.
It seems like that. It really does. I have a feeling it's going to get old real quick for me. But as happens, everybody wants to talk about it, and that's not a bad thing. So I'm going to do my part to try to. I hate to say to educate people because it sounds kind of snobbery about it, but to help people learn and understand what we're doing and why we think it benefits them in the long run, because I think it will make AMD a better company. I think it will make NVIDIA a better company because of it.
That is a very, very good thing. I'm on vacation right now, so I'm not going to get too deep into what's coming up on Techzilla, but I will say high-end headphones and the Bowers & Wilkins, their new actually AirPlay devices, which have been really, really fun to listen to. And I think there may be something coming out and maybe involving FreeNAS, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Fair enough.
I will have to stop playing with my children long enough to finish building it, which is definitely a challenge. So I'll just lay it at that. Revision3.com/Techzilla is where you can find me in my day job. PCPer.com is where you can find Ryan in all his frame rating glory. And as we mentioned earlier, Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. We love your questions. Keep firing them out to us. And if you want to, if this is your first experience with the Twitch podcast and you're not horrified, you'd like to actually hear more, that's awesome. We want more of, we want everybody who enjoys computers and hardware to listen to the show. Twit.tv/Twitch is where you can find all the episodes and information on subscribing in your favorite net catcher. Because I think Podcatcher is probably far too 2005. So we'll call it a net catcher now. That's about it for this week in computer hardware. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.